if it's conservative.
If you're looking for something liberal
and realistic, this is the place to be.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the podcast with No Name. We are focusing much of our attention on the church heritage, just to know our identities as a church, where we came from, and why we are in existence in the first place, and why we decide to follow the faith of the Seventh-day Adventist message. And in the last episode, we touched on the church in Eden, outside Eden, and then the family churches. There was Noah, Abraham, and Lot. And we got to understand the diversities amongst the church, the families in the church, like the church of Noah, the church of Lot. We also spoke about you can also be saved by your works. For example, in Lot's house, his subordinates, according to what was mentioned, should have been saved by works, but unfortunately, she wasn't. And we want to just have our pastors briefly touch on the descendants from the family churches, Shem, Ham, Japheth, before we then move on to the church of on to the next church.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sure you are referring to the family of Noah.
Yes.
Where we have those three boys. Before I say that, I would have loved to say, I was thinking about COVID-19. It came and it led us back to the family churches.
Yes.
To me, it could have been a problem to all of us because we were suffering. But I'm somehow thinking God had decided to press a reset button to go to the foundation, to the founding principles of the church, where we were churching in our homes, and now we're back together. Okay. So any church, the strength of any church, it starts in the home.
In the home.
Yes. If my family, your family, her family, and his family, we have founding principles that are basic. Even when we go to church, we'll be in one accord. Even the Holy Spirit, or the latter rain, as we say it, would be upon us because we are united. We know of our problems. So there is Noah. He had 3 children. With the 3 children, we're part of his church. We also have Ham, Japheth, and Shem. Sometimes we get confused in terms of races from this family.
Okay.
Because we remember that after the flood, there is the father. We had a weakness. After farming, usually after farming and after we've harvested, we want to experiment on a lot of things. Just like after what we do, and we have a lot of profits, Pastor God, we just want to test the water.
Taste the water.
There is the man, then he's drunk, and then the youngest of the boys sees the father naked, and he laughs at the father. But the father does not insult the young man. He says, "Cursed be Canaan."
Okay.
And many times we think of, by the way, this church had the authority to curse someone.
Okay.
Yes. Because they had a relationship with God. Because if you have a relationship with God, the same authority God gives it to you. Okay. So the father, who is the priest of the family, curses the mzukuru who is outside. I'm looking at this mzukuru, maybe he's driving a brick. And then the grandfather curses the young man. But this is where we are going, Pastor Gate. Our race, we Africans, we don't come from the cursed Canaan.
Thank you.
Yes. We need to make that one very, very clear. I'm sure it's a subject on its own, Pastor Ronnie. It's a sharp subject on its own.
Great.
Yeah. He's a pastor in making. It's a subject on its own. But one thing that I want us to understand, we are not from the race of Canaan who was cursed.
Thank you for that clarity. Yeah.
Okay, so you then notice maybe from Shem, we have the Shemites, of whom came Abraham, who became the father of faith. And there's a text that I want to throw, Genesis chapter 18, verse 19. God is now justifying why he called Abraham. Let me run there. Genesis chapter 18, verse 19. Why Abraham of all the people?
Whilst he's looking for that verse, because already I can see we are going to Abraham, it's interesting to note that the Bible then says that Noah was uncovered in his tent.
Yes.
there's something wrong with being uncovered. And if it is wrong to be uncovered in your tent, now
How much
imagine
more?
being uncovered on the streets of Haran. I'm just throwing it there. And before Pastor Nehemiah is now itching. Before that, from the contribution that he has made, it says that because this child saw the nakedness of his father,
Yeah.
he was the
Mzukuru was
was then cursed. So there was something wrong with what the child did to the father. Because it says that he saw the nakedness of the father, isn't it? And it's interesting, it goes to the commandments. Honor thy father and thy mother. So notice that from the previous episode, we had come up with the commandments of the Sabbath, with the commandment of honoring your father and mother, with also the commandment of thou shalt not murder.
Yeah.
Here now we have thou shalt honor your mother and father. So notice that there is a build up to the commandments, which is happening in the Old Testament before the Exodus experience.
Actually, this is Genesis chapter 9 for the sake of our viewers. We are in chapter 9 of Genesis and then chapter 10. I also have a problem, Paida. Why is the young man busy peeping in other people's tents?
I think
Dad is sleeping in his tent.
Okay.
And the young man is busy. We have many people who are like that.
Peeping Toms.
Yeah. By the way, I'm the youth pastor, so I'll say it this way. We have people who have a tendency of peeping into other people's relationships.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're always peeping, and then find what the father had done was wrong.
Yes.
It was so wrong.
It was none of his business.
But the young man also, he has a challenge of doing things that are so wrong at the same time. And the young man could have cursed the father for sleeping naked, but he had no authority.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay, wait, before you move on this.
It's fine.
So this one saw the nakedness of the father, and he went and told the other
brothers.
brothers.
Yes.
How many youths have seen the nakedness?
Of other
You are in a relationship.
Yes.
You decide to see the nakedness
Of someone's
not of the relationship.
But
you decide to sin with Ronnie and see his nakedness. Then after seeing the nakedness of Ronnie, I go around my friends telling them of your nakedness.
I think we are now talking about.
Now let's go to
Let's stick to church heritage.
In Genesis chapter 10, there's the fall of Babel.
Yes.
Chapter 11, actually, we see the fall of Babel. And at the end of chapter 11, we see God now is now shaping Abraham for calling. Chapter 12 is called. And chapter 13 is already moving.
Yes.
And chapter 14 is the life of Abraham. I'd said Genesis chapter 18, verse 19, God justifying why he called Abraham.
Yes.
For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him.
Yes.
And they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he spake of him. Do you see the reason why God is saying he instituted family churches? The person Abraham was called. God had seen the ability in him to teach and to command his children the ways of the Lord.
So should we say then, Pastor, you're not supposed to marry before you're able to command your children?
Sure. Don't come here like what you said in the last episode. Don't come here and preach to us before what Pada said. Take care of a family first. Preach to your own people first. God said Abraham has the capacity to command his own children.
Okay.
So I'm calling him. So what we learn from this family church is that Abraham is called of God because he had the capacity
To command.
to command
Okay.
his own children.
Okay.
So as we move now to the sons and daughters of Abraham, as they come, fire is now burning, they are coming from the commandment of Abraham. You can take over, my sister.
Okay, I just wanted to say, he mentioned the issue of Babel. I just want to throw in the spanners there that on the issue of Babel, tongues were introduced for a specific reason.
Yes.
So when we get to the New Testament, I hope we get there, it doesn't start there. It starts at Babel, where the issue of tongues is introduced. Now we go back to the comment that he just made, that Abraham was able to manage his household.
Yes.
He had no children, but his household was managed. Sarah was managed.
Sure.
The army in his household was managed.
Army again.
So the people who were in the household before the children, they were church.
So,
Okay,
so Paida,
okay.
you were teaching kids at camp meeting. Don't we have children that expose the inability of their fathers to manage them?
Oh, okay.
So I'm thinking to myself, this is my thinking. When we look at pathfinders, when we look at adventurers, sometimes we are quick to say kids of the last days. Does it not also go back to
the
this,
Think of the parents of the last days.
to the parents of the last
Yeesh,
days?
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I would like to believe that there is a theory that children are born as a blank disc,
Yes.
and then we impart to them the knowledge that we want them to have. But it's interesting that being in the ark doesn't mean that you are saved.
Okay. Okay.
So Noah and his family and the children were taught right things, and they went into the ark because it says there were 8 righteous men. But out of the ark, do you realize that there are certain things that they did which were not in accordance with what they were taught by their parents? So yes, a parent like Abraham can teach the good things to their children. But remember, we are given the power of choice. And these choices, we tend to make them even at a tender age.
I don't know. It doesn't sorrow again.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Allow me to then move to the
Yes.
Church of Jacob, which was the hopping church, Church of Israel, where we see the introduction of theocracy.
Yes.
All right.
Funny, before you move to the Church of Jacob, I'm itching. Do you notice that the church in the time of Abraham
Yes.
would get to a point where God says, I cannot do this before
telling
I
the church.
tell
The
the
church.
church.
The church.
Okay.
So the church ought to have a relationship with God to the extent that the Lord does not just do things. There ought to be a church which communicates with God.
Yes. yes.
Which God says, I'm planning on
do
destroying.
something.
I'm
What do you think?
planning on what do you think?
about
And then this church will then intercede on behalf of, because they have a relationship with God. So yes, we get to Jacob, but this church, look at it.
Problem.
I'm selfish.
I think the problem that we have is that we're looking at Abraham, who when he goes to Kwekwe, he builds an altar. He goes to Kadoma, he has an altar there. He goes to Noton, he has an altar there. When we move around, where we are moving around, we don't have altars.
So what's a modern day altar?
It's just simply prayer.
Okay.
Yeah, because this was a tool of communication with God.
Okay.
I would like to add, he said it's just simple prayer. To me, it's not that.
Talk
You
to
need
us.
to have, in your house, you ought to have a prayer room or a place where you ought to be praying.
Thank you.
To say, this is where in our house we pray. We visit these relatives. We take time to pray. You know how it is when we say, it's now time for prayer, and everyone, we just put our gadgets on silent. And then we say we are communicating to God. There's something wrong with that. They would build an altar to say, this is
And one
where we
place.
pray.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I'm liking that part, Paida. Let's have prayer rooms.
Prayer rooms.
Not only in our homes, in our companies, let's have prayer rooms. So that when you are in that branch for that particular day, you have a prayer room.
Place of prayer.
Yeah, you have a place of prayer.
Let's talk about Jacob.
Yeah.
Yes. let's go to Jacob now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So as Jacob is coming, he's coming from the lineage of Abraham. Of course, we skipped Isaac. It's fine. Let's look at Jacob. Jacob is the father of Israel.
Yes.
And here we're moving from more of a family church to a national church. Because we have...
Before you move to the national church, this
Let
was
him
a
move.
thief.
Let him move.
Let's remember, Jacob was a thief.
Let him move. Let him move.
So this is a church that is converted.
Yeah.
Okay, from its thievery to be a house of nations.
Yeah.
So before we are a church here, point, we need to have an intersection with God. We need to have a time whereby we are converted.
Yeah.
And you see the elements of conversion through and through. And he has his 12 sons, and of course his daughter, Dinah, is there.
Yeah.
And we have this big church. It's the same church that has Reuben, Gad, Levi, and also Joseph. And Joseph is taking the church even into Egypt. And the church is now in Egypt. I just want to comment on that church as it is now in Egypt. It's still distinct. Because Jacob remembered that these, my brothers, are going to be different from the Egyptians. Let them go and stay in Goshen.
Yes.
The rest of the Egyptians are, they are farmers. Then Joseph says, no, give us Goshen because we keep our sheep. So they're keeping their distinction.
Right.
So they are known that these are Israelites, these are children of God. Maybe allow me to end by saying, from Genesis chapter 4, Paida, we have two people. We have the child of God or the son of God and the son of man. And it's running through and through generations. We have Abraham who is joining the church of God, the church of sonship, the sons of men. That's why you quoted in the last episode that now the sons of men, the sons of God, so that the daughters of men were beautiful. So there are these two people. So we have our Jacob, we have our Esau. The church is distinct. We have this church, Joseph, is now in Egypt, but it's different from the rest. We have these two people, the sons of God and the sons of men. We need to keep our garments clean and distinct as the church of God.
Okay.
You say it is ending. I'm starting. Okay. Remember, I mentioned that this was a thief. And in that aspect, when he's moving, going to his uncle's house, he has an encounter with God. And then there's the ladder. We call it the Jacob's ladder, where he notices or realizes that there's a connection between heaven and earth. This connection comes in Jesus Christ. Remember the seed. So we are talking about a church which realized that they've sinned. And after sinning, they see that they need the ladder for them to be connected with heaven. And then from that ladder, when he is now coming back, he went, isn't it? And when he is now coming back, he has a moment, because Esau is coming, he then has a moment alone with God. He sent the families to go in groups, yes. But then he's left alone to have a moment with God. So yes, you may be in the church of the family, but there's a time when you need to have a moment one-on-one with God. And the Bible, it seems as if they had a fight during the night, throughout the night, struggling with God. And then in that struggle, he was, to me, the Lord was showing him his weaknesses, his sins, to the extent that his name is then changed.
Thank you.
So you need to have an encounter with God for your name to be changed. I remember there was a presentation when me presented on this is not my name. Jacob's name had to be changed to Israel. And then he mentioned something interesting. He went to Genesis chapter 4. And we noticed that because he was taught, and he taught even his kids also that we don't intermarry. They got to a point where this child, this daughter, the only one in the family, goes to the other nation. And to them, she was raped. Whatever happened to them, it was rape. And then these guys come and say, let's have a relationship through marriage. But because the boys were taught in the right way, they decided, no, our sister cannot be married to these heathens. How many times are we allowing our sisters to be married to heathens?
For political reasons, for financial reasons.
Especially for finances, because these guys had things. So, but in this house of Israel, remember it's now Israel, they refused for this one to be married to this generation.
All right, thank you so much. What we want to wrap up. This session. But before you say, you need to say something. But I also want you to then touch on. We are talking of characteristics of this church. It was an obedient church, right? It was a distinct church, and it was a church that was sifted. So I want you to also touch on those as you give your submission. The obedience of the church based on their refusal to kill the children, right? And the sifting of.
Okay, thank you very much. I was itching when Paira was saying something. I like this church because it's not a condemning church.
Okay.
Yeah, many times we're just quick to condemn our brothers. This is a church that recognizes that when a brother is gone and is lost, when he comes back, we embrace the brother.
Yes.
I'm looking at Esau
Right.
when Jacob is coming back. Jacob was ready for a fight. And
Esau
the
was ready for
brother,
reconciliation.
Esau was saying, no, this is my brother. We belong to the same church.
Yes.
In as much as we have different ideologies, we are not going to fight. Even in public, we'll just come and reconcile.
Yes,
That was the
yes.
story. But we're looking at this church now, which has been termed by Pastor Gat a national church. The nation is now in captive in Egypt. And because they are in Egypt, there are certain things that happen in Egypt that are not for this church. Children have been born. Now the nation is threatened by the existence of this church.
Yeah.
And they say, no. Let's cut off the male children. Let's do away with them so that we can.
So they were empowering the girl child. Also, you can continue.
Yeah. So these guys agree as a nation
Okay.
that these are strangers. And the Bible starts off by telling us that they came also a Pharaoh who never knew Joseph. We'll talk about that one. So they decided to say, let's depopulate them. How do we do that? We kill the male children.
Yes.
And who are supposed then to kill these male children? That's where midwives come in.
Okay.
The Egyptians had their midwives. The Israelites had their midwives.
Distinction.
There's a distinction there. All are midwives, but there's a distinction. And then when this decree has been passed, the midwives from Israel, then they said, we cannot do this.
All right.
These are our midwives. They
We
say,
can't kill.
we have the capacity to kill,
kill.
but we can't do it.
We can't do it, yeah.
And then I'm looking at them saying this in the face of the bosses, the HR managers and stuff like that, saying this we can't do. And then the entire nation would say, then who? Now, this is where it's interesting, Pastor Gat and Paida. Israelites would not give birth in the presence of Egyptian midwives.
Oh, serious.
So they needed an Israelite midwife to help in the giving birth of an Israelite child.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So now there is a situation. And then the midwife said, no, we will not do that. Children will continue to be born, and I'm looking at Israelite women who are pregnant. And now they're thinking to themselves, I'm supposed to give birth, but the midwives are no longer there. Many times we want to protect our jobs, not our identity. We want to protect our pockets.
So
not
let's have our own
religion.
institutions.
Let's have our own institutions. Let's have our midwives. Let's have our hospitals, our schools, our companies, our businesses. In fact, let's have our own economy.
To
which is-
protect the interests.
Yes, to
Yeah.
protect our interests.
Do you know something? Is it the Muslims? The halal people? They are only less than 10% of the population in South Africa, but almost close to 90% of the meat in South Africa is halal.
Sure.
Yeah.
They
That's how
control.
powerful they are. So we also need to also identify with our norms and customs.
Exactly.
So this was a different church altogether. The midwives refused, but then Moses is born. I don't have an answer to the question that who then participated in the giving birth of Moses.
Yeah.
Because we already know that we have midwives in our church.
Yes. Okay.
They managed to protect Moses. And it does not mean also that Moses was the only protected male child. We have others who are not mentioned because our midwives, they took away the workplaces, but not the wisdom and the knowledge.
Thank you.
Yes. So that's how distinct this church was. Apart from that, this church was a church that specialized in keeping sheep, not in farming.
Okay.
That's how unique it was. Lastly, this was a church when it needed to go and worship God, they would carry everything. When I say everything, I mean even the spoons, the plates. They would say, we are going to worship our God.
Right.
This is the church.
Okay. Last words in 1 minute. 1 minute. Yes.
Okay.
You're calculating a minute.
I'll try. Okay, I just wanted to mention that notice that the church had grown. It was now bigger. It was no longer just a family church, but a national church. And also notice that it gets to a point where, remember we mentioned in our previous episode about working, it goes to a point where in that era, the Egyptian says, let their more work be laid upon the men, that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words. It is actually nicer in Shona it seems to say that ipai varume basa kuti vasawanze kutaura. So you'd notice that most of the time when the men are just busy bickering, and it means there's no work which is being given to them. So if there is work which is being given to them and they go back to Genesis, then they won't be this bickering and
I
talking.
think engineer, switch off your mic.
And also notice that when Moses then comes to this church, he's saying to Pharaoh, let us go so that we can rest. Going back again to what? To Genesis, where the order of the day was for the people to rest. Work, yes, but you also need to rest also.
I would say that this church is interesting. Genesis chapter 50, verse 24. Joseph, before he dies, he says, there's home in Canaan. Even my bones should not sleep in Egypt. Let them be taken over. So it was a church that was waiting. And I like it. They had their own prophecies. Remember I said about the prophecies in the time of Noah. These two had their own prophecies. You remember the story of Abraham. They're going to be in captivity for 400 years. Then the 400 years are done. They're going to get out. So each and every church has its own prophecies. And as Spider ended, their present truth. And the present truth is home we are going, and going indeed. So they ended their church at the Red Sea when they were crossing and going into the church in the
I have something, Ronnie, please.
Before
I forget.
Last comment.
Before I forget.
Last comment.
Not only did others remain in Egypt, we have Egyptians who joined. You can be in the right church, the church that's going home. You can remain and someone be out there and still go home. Yes.
I think we still have a lot to do on the Church of Jacob. So we are going to have to start with the Church of Jacob again, because when you were speaking about the bones, I then thought about the topic, the state of the dead, which we have to cover when you go to the state or to the Church of Jacob. But it has been a lovely topic, and I'm enjoying the church heritage. I hope you are enjoying it as well. And do join us next time on this episode again. My name is Ronald. This is Pastor Piri. This is Paida, Pastor Gate. From us, until next time, it's bye-bye.
If it's conservative,
If you're looking for something liberal,
and realistic, this is the place to be.